In the morning on a narrow tributary feeding the Lake Champlain Basin, and the air is thick with dawn mist, smelling of damp earth and cold moving water. Brad Young, a biologist with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, stands waist-deep in the current, his headlamp cutting a hard beam through the gray twilight. Around him, the crew works in silence, their breaths blooming into small clouds. They haul a heavy metal trap from the riverbed, the iron grating dripping, and inside a chaotic mass of life shifts and writhes. Brad reaches in with gloved hands and sorts the catch by flashlight. He slips the native fish back into the dark stream one by one until his fingers close on something smooth, scaleless, and muscular, twisting against his grip. He turns it over, and the flashlight finds the thing that makes this animal unmistakable. A jawless, circular disc lined with concentric rows of horn-shaped teeth. This is the sea lamprey. And here is the strange part Brad already knows by heart. In the Atlantic Ocean, a few hundred miles east, this exact animal is almost harmless. There, the fish it feeds on barely notice it. Here, in this basin, it nearly emptied the water. Across the Great Lakes and the connected basins, a quiet catastrophe unfolded over the 20th century. The cause was not a chemical or a warming climate. It was a living fossil, a jawless parasite older than the dinosaurs, and it did so much damage to the fisheries that the United States and Canada were forced into an unprecedented alliance, spending more than $400 million across 7 decades to fight it. Their main weapon was a selective poison, applied again and again into hundreds of spawning streams. An effort that expensive and that aggressive sounds like a campaign built for one outcome: total eradication, a final triumphant end to the invader. It was not. The lamprey is still here. It will always be here. And the most complete solution to this animal was never found in a laboratory or bought with a single dollar. It was found in the ocean, millions of years before the first stream was ever treated. Hold that thought. To understand how an ancient marine parasite drained the largest freshwater network on Earth, go back to the early 19th century. The sea lamprey, Petromyzon marinus, is native to the Atlantic, where it spent millions of years alongside thick-scaled ocean fish and large marine mammals. That long shared history matters because in its native water, the lamprey rarely kills its host. Its prey co-evolved to survive it. The animal behaves less like a killer than a hitchhiker. Everything changed when humans began redrawing the map of North America. The first sea lamprey recorded in the Great Lakes system appeared in Lake Ontario in 1835, and for decades the roaring wall of Niagara Falls held them there, unable to climb any farther inland. Then came commercial shipping. Engineers deepened and improved the Welland Canal, a passage built to carry cargo ships around the falls between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. The logic was purely economic. No one was thinking about biology. By going around the falls, the canal opened an artificial highway straight into the upper lakes. The lamprey reached Lake Erie by 1921, then spread fast. Lake Michigan by 1936, Lake Huron by 1937. The cold, deep water of Lake Superior by 1938. What they found was paradise. Thousands of miles of clean gravel streams for spawning and an endless supply of slow, heavy host fish, lake trout, whitefish, lake sturgeon, that had evolved in isolation and carried no defenses against a parasite like this one. The collapse was immediate. Before the invasion, the upper Great Lakes yielded roughly 15 million pounds of lake trout a year. By the early 1960s, that catch had fallen to about 300,000 pounds, 2% of what it had been. The economy tied to the water came apart with it. In some areas, surveys found up to 85% of the surviving fish carried the deep circular scars of lamprey attacks. In Lake Champlain, the wounding ran as high as 99 wounds for every 100 lake trout. A single adult lamprey can destroy up to 40 pounds of fish in its brief feeding window, anchoring to a host, rasping through skin and muscle, and releasing a saliva that keeps the wound from clotting so the blood never stops flowing. Faced with the end of the fishery, the United States and Canada created the Great Lakes Fishery Commission in 1955, and what followed became one of the largest sustained aquatic control programs ever attempted. But the first instinct failed completely. Poisoning open water did nothing. The lamprey was too widespread, too resilient. No single barrier stopped them. No bounty cleared them. The war could not be won with one blow, and the teams running it slowly accepted a harder truth. This would not be a victory. It would be maintenance, forever. If you find yourself wanting to know how these systems actually work underneath the surface, this channel exists for exactly that kind of question. So they stopped trying to win and started studying the animal. The sea lamprey survived more than 300 million years and outlived the dinosaurs because its design is ruthlessly simple. But simplicity creates a weakness, and the weakness is the larvae. A single female can lay roughly 100,000 eggs in a single spawning run. When those eggs hatch in the gravel of tributary streams, they become amocoetes, blind and toothless, and they burrow into the soft mud where they spend 3 to 10 years filter feeding before they ever grow teeth. That is the bottleneck. Rather than chase millions of adults across thousands of square miles of open lake, scientists realized they could strike the lamprey while it sat concentrated and helpless in a handful of predictable nursery streams. They tested thousands of compounds searching for one that would kill larval lamprey without harming native fish, insects, or plants, and they found it in a molecule abbreviated TFM. Larval lampreys lack the liver enzymes to detoxify it, so a careful dose moving down a stream kills the next generation of parasites and leaves the trout and salmon largely untouched. This is the real resolution, and it works like a pincer. One arm is chemical, the quiet, seasonal treatment of spawning streams that erases the larvae before they can transform. The other arm is physical. Because the lamprey has no true skeleton and cannot jump, low barriers and dams that a salmon clears easily stop it cold, and adjacent traps let crews sort the migrating adults out by hand. Chemistry below, structure above, closing from both directions. And it arrived without the ecosystem's permission, an artificial shield bolted onto the water and held in place by people who have to show up every single season. There is a comforting rumor that the native fish are quietly solving this themselves, evolving thicker scales or a tolerance to lamprey attacks, that nature is taking the burden back. The data from the United States Geological Survey does not support it. There is no evolutionary rescue underway in the Great Lakes. The lake trout swimming there today survive because of human chemistry and human steel, and for no other reason. The proof is in the recovery. The early rounds of TFM cut lamprey numbers across most of the basin by about 90%. Self-sustaining lake trout returned to parts of the upper lakes, and in 2022, the Lake Champlain program reached its first 30-year restoration goals. Real success, rented success. Cut the funding for even a few seasons, and the parasite rebuilds and the fishery falls again. The reason anyone keeps paying is simple arithmetic. The fishery this program protects is worth several $billions a year across 8 states and 2 provinces, supporting commercial catch, recreation, and the towns built around them. The control program costs on the order of $25 million a year. Set a multi-billion-dollar return against a $25 million bill, and the decision makes itself year after year in budget lines split roughly 2 to 1 between the United States and Canada. So every year, the appropriations pass and the money flows into stream surveys, into TFM, into barrier repair, and every year the recovered fishery generates far more than it costs to defend. It is a permanent loop, an ecosystem kept alive on a subscription that can never be canceled. And this is not one strange case. It is a pattern spreading as commerce keeps reshuffling the planet's biology. Acoustic and electric barriers now hold the line against Asian carp pressing toward the Great Lakes. Zebra and quagga mussels have rewritten the lower food web and force water plants to spend billions clearing their pipes. Burmese pythons have hollowed out the mammals of the Everglades. The cane toad still rolls across Australia. Each one teaches the same lesson about human confidence. We believe we can move a canal, redraw a coastline, carry a species across an ocean, and simply fix whatever breaks with a one-time solution. Ecology keeps a longer ledger. Once a natural barrier is broken, the bill outlives the people who broke it. Which brings us back to the thing the ocean already knew. In the Atlantic, the fish survive the sea lamprey for free because evolution spent millions of years teaching them how, and it never sent an invoice. The Great Lakes never had that time. So two nations are buying the same outcome the only other way it can be bought, $400 million and counting, one stream at a time, with no final payment in sight. It is 6 in the evening now, back on the tributary. The sun is dropping below the tree line and the water runs gold over the gravel where the native trout will spawn. Brad Young and his crew load the buckets into the truck, their hands numb, their waders heavy with mud, and switch off the lamps. Brad looks back at the river. If we stop, he says, they come back. It is a plain fact, stripped of drama. The lamprey is not gone and it never will be. Evolution solved this once, in another ocean, for nothing. Here we have agreed to solve it ourselves and to keep paying for the privilege, for as long as we want the fish to stay. So the question worth sitting with is this. Can an ecosystem ever take back its own independence once human hands have rewritten its rules, or have we quietly signed up to manage every corner of the living world forever?